Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
Hello and good evening to all of you out there. This is Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles, and I'm here, unfortunately, tonight by myself. Jonathan Wilson is traveling with family, and he will return next Sunday night. And Josh Jacobs, I want to thank him for being with us last week. Everything is wonderful there, and we're looking forward to having a good show. If you'd like to be part of the program here tonight, dial us in. The lines are wide open at 866-870-5752. Once again, 866-870-5752. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, being part of the show. Let me adjust my headphones here a little bit. There we are. That's a little bit better. I wasn't able to hear my own voice on these headphones. Got that fixed. I happened to come across a very interesting article yesterday, and I thought I would lead off by reading it. It was sent to me by a friend of mine, Robert De Pietro. But it's an article by Victor Davis Hanson. I know that this audience knows who Victor Davis Hanson is, but in case you don't, he's a well-known author and historian. He's a classicist, now retired, I think, professor of classics in the California State University system. He's a fellow at the Hoover Institute. He speaks all over. He's written so many good books and articles I couldn't begin to name them. And if you want to have some fun, if you like this topic, go on YouTube and just type in Victor Davis Hanson, and you'll get some wonderful lectures there that you can listen to while you're on the way to work in the morning. That is, of course, when you're not listening to this station in the morning. In any event, here's Victor Davis Hanson's article, and I think it will furnish a lot of material for discussion here today. The title of his article, which came out on April 10th, just a few days ago, is as follows: California has become America's cannibal state. You'll see the reference at the end. And it goes like this. For over 6 years, California has had a top marginal income tax rate of 13.3%, the highest in the nation. About 150,000 households in a state of 40 million people now pay nearly half of the total annual state income tax. Because tomorrow is the 15th, this is a good day. Let's repeat that. 150,000 households out of 4 million people pay nearly half of the state income tax and 1/4 of all tax revenues here in the state of California. Continuing, the state legislature sold that confiscatory tax rate on the idea that it was a temporary fix and would eventually be phased out. No one believed that. California voters, about 40% of whom pay no state income taxes, naturally approved the extension of the high rate by an overwhelming margin. California recently raised gas taxes by 40% and now has the second highest gas taxes in the United States. And parenthetically, I might note that's in a state which is the third largest energy producer in the country. Even with all of our silly and draconian environmental laws, we still are the number 3 oil producer in the country, and we could be larger. California has the 9th highest combined state and local taxes in the country, but its state sales tax of 7.3% is America's highest. And parenthetically again, you know that here in this county, that's just the state's piece of the action. It permits counties and cities to stack it up to the point where I think we're now at 10.25%. In almost every city in Los Angeles County. As of April 1st, California is now applying that high state sales tax to goods that residents buy online from out-of-state sellers. In late 2017, the federal government capped state and local tax deductions at $10,000. For high earners in California, the change effectively almost doubled their state and local taxes. Such high taxes, often targeting a small percentage of the population, may have brought California a small budget surplus of more than $20 million. Yet California is never satiated with high new tax rates that bring in additional revenue. It is always hungry for more. Scott Wiener, a Democratic state senator from San Francisco, you guys are going to love this, has introduced a bill that would create a new California estate tax. Wiener outlined a death tax of 40% on estates worth more than $3.5 million for single Californians or more than $7 million for married couples. Given the soaring valuations of California properties, a new estate tax could force children to sell homes or family farms they inherited just to pay the tax bills. Soon, even more of the California taxpayers who chip in to pay half of the state income taxes will flee in droves for low-tax or no-tax states. What really irks California taxpayers are the shoddy public services that they receive in exchange for such burdensome taxes. California can be found near the bottom of state rankings for schools and infrastructure. San Francisco ranks first among America's largest cities in property crimes per capita. The massive concrete ruins of the state's quarter-built and now either canceled or postponed multi-billion-dollar so-called high-speed rail system are already collecting graffiti. Roughly a quarter of the nation's homeless live in California. So do about one-third of all Americans on public assistance. Approximately one-fifth of the state's population lives below the poverty line. About one-third of Californians are enrolled in Medi-Cal, the state's health care program for low-income residents. California's social programs, of course, are magnets that draw in the indigent from all over the world who arrive in search of generous health, education, legal, nutritional, and housing subsidies. Some 27% of the state's residents were not born in the United States. Last month alone, nearly 100,000 foreign nationals were stopped at the southern border, according to officials. Huge numbers of migrants are able to make it across without being caught, and many end up in California. A lot of upper-middle-class taxpayers feel that not only does California fail to appreciate their contributions, but that the state often blames them for not paying even more, as if paying about half of their incomes to local, state, and federal governments somehow reveals their greed. The hyper-wealthy liberal denizens of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and the coastal enclaves often seem exempt from the consequences of the high taxes they so often advocate for others. The super-rich either have the clout to hire experts to help them avoid such taxes, or they simply have so much money that they are not much affected by even California's high taxes. What is the ideology behind such destructive state policies? Venezuela, which is driving out its middle class, is apparently California's model. Venezuelan leaders believed in providing vast subsidies for the poor. The country's super-rich are often crony capitalists who can avoid high taxes. Similarly, California is waging an outright war on the upper middle class, which lacks the numbers of the poor and the clout of the rich. There's a beautiful sentence. I'm going to read it again. Similarly, California is waging an outright war on the upper middle class, which lacks the numbers of the poor and the clout of the rich. Those who administer California's plagued Department of Motor Vehicles and High-Speed Rail Authority may often be inept and dysfunctional, but the state's tax collectors are the most obsessive bureaucrats in the nation. What is Sacramento's message to those who combine to pay the state's income taxes and yet have not left California? Here's the punchline. Be gone, or we will eat you. Hence the title to his article, California Has Become America's Cannibal State. I'd love to hear your impressions about this. A lot of it, I suspect, is not new to you out there, but I'd be very interested to hear from people who are contemplating a move to another state, and if you're not contemplating a move to a lower tax state such as Nevada, Texas, Arizona, Idaho, or even Washington State, which has no income tax, even though some of their other taxes are quite high. I'd love to hear from you and see what you think about it. But certainly, what we're dealing with here in this particular situation is absolutely outrageous. We increasingly are paying more and more in this state and getting less and less for it. And when you look at the structure of our politics here in the state, it is clear that the number one problem that we have is that it's a one-party state. But that one-party state has many manifestations. And I heard Victor Davis Hanson and others discussing this in a panel as to what's behind California's problems, and they frequently look at that, at the fact that we're a one-party state. But I think to say that really ignores what's behind it, and that is how that one party operates, or how government itself operates. And we don't have just the Democrat Party here. It is part of a large apparatus that is joined together with government itself. I'm not the first to observe that there is a substantial identity between the Democrat Party and, to a lesser extent, the Republican Party, because and the only reason I don't emphasize it is because they're not that large anymore. But when you look throughout the local governments, large cities, and the state of California in general, the Democrat Party and the bureaucracies operate as one and the same. It has been noted many times by many people in many places that the origins of the growth of government coincide with the rise of the public employee unions in the 70s, with the demise of the Rust Belt, the move of manufacturing to the south of the United States, and then in many cases outside of the United States. When the unions regrouped, they had to find a new place to create membership, and that place was government. It was from then on, it was for them at that point not only the fastest growing business in the United States, but with them now in charge of it, unionizing, engaging in collective bargaining, particularly at the state and local level. From then on, the business of unions was government. There was no difference between them. And because they were now unions operating under various federal and state legislation, they were enabled to engage in politics. They used this money to basically choose their own bosses in a way in which you and I do not get to do. When we negotiate with our employers, or when we negotiate with our employees don't get to vote us out of office. They don't get to vote us out of ownership or of our officer status within a corporation. They have to deal with us as we are, and with the with the legal and contractual power that we have. They simply are not able to diss us and then go out and elect somebody else to take over. But that is precisely what happens in government. And when you look at the public employee unions and the governments that they control and in the institutions that they control fire and safety, and they control the schools. They control much else besides that. Service Employees International, all these other organizations, the Prison Guards Association, Highway Patrolmen Association, all these people ultimately control our government, and their prime directive, as I've mentioned so many times before, is to grow government. And therefore, because of the way that they operate, each and every public employee ultimately at some level is a paid partisan political activist. And that's just the reality. And this is what is behind the growth of the state. There's no pushback from anybody, and they take that money that we pay them in high salaries and impossible benefits, and they turn around and plow it into political action. And this was the point that I think it was Judge Gorsuch who wrote the Janus decision. This was the very point that Judge Gorsuch made, that all such negotiations with government are in and of themselves political. Any interaction between unions and government is, by definition, political, and if you are compelled to pay dues to that institution, it is you are being compelled to support someone else's political speech in violation of the First Amendment. And as a result, large numbers of public employees have started to leave the unions, but not enough. And the reason why they haven't left the unions in very large numbers here in the state of California is not only because of the roadblocks, legal and otherwise, that are being put in the path of employees who want to withdraw from the union, but worse yet, many of these union members do not want to leave. And why would they want to? These unions here in the state of California have consistently delivered higher and higher salaries, completely disproportionate to the private sector, and they have delivered, most importantly for them, incredible retirement benefits. In other words, lifetime guaranteed employment followed by lifetime guaranteed retirement at up to 90% of the salary that you made while you were working. It is outrageous and unworkable. And this juggernaut that we call government is used for one thing, and it is to feed and benefit the government class to the detriment of the electorate. And so they keep going after money, whenever and however that they can, and they do whatever they want. And when you look at how these guys operate, you begin to understand why they need the public schools as they are. It is simply outrageous here, and I'm going to read you a few articles in a minute. While I'm thinking about it, our lines are wide open, so if any of you would like to call, you can reach us at 866-870-5752. So if you're sitting outside enjoying this wonderful spring Sunday evening, happen to be listening to the radio, we'd love to hear from you on these topics. So now let's move from that. I think Victor Davis Hanson's article, it's short. He can't deal with everything in one fell swoop. But I think that the role of the public employee unions and the business model that modern government embraces is a much more significant factor even than ideology. What do I mean by that? Well, ideology is, of course, largely political. The idea that they seek unlimited government power, that they want to implement certain policies. Maybe they're anti-Christian, maybe they're anti-capital, capitalism. Maybe they're all of those things, but underneath what they want is money. And my observation about the public employee unions is that ultimately they're running a business, and one of the best businesses in the country. After all, government has at least a 50% market share across all business lines in the country. Over 50% of the net income is being paid out by a lot of people. And nationally, the government's taking upwards of 25%. But worse than that, it's driving up debt. Particularly pension debt here in the state of California is $1.5 trillion. So the question that we'll take up in the second half hour here is how this political power manifests itself, and we must begin to discuss how it is that we're going to push back at this ideology, at this one-party state, how we're going to push back at this business model, how it is that we regain our freedom here in the United States, because that is what is really ultimately at stake. It isn't just money in and of itself, property. Your money, the right to earn it, the right to keep it, are inherent human rights. They are guaranteed by our Constitution, although the Constitution itself is increasingly rejected by these people. And when I say these people, I'm talking about the apostles of big government. I'm talking about the people in academia, the people in the mainstream media, the people in our state legislature who haven't taxed enough, haven't given away enough, haven't redistributed enough. They're busy at it today. And I'll have to confess that even though I'm in the trust and investment management business, I was not aware that of the California proposal to introduce a California state tax. What they're trying to do is to fill that vacuum that was left when the federal legislature raised the estate tax minimums so as to preserve these estates. And now the state of California wants to come in and suck up the money that the government left on the table, the federal government, that is. It's outrageous. These people are never done with us. And when you see what the value of these houses are in these neighborhoods, it's going to be terrible. You're not going to be able to keep the family home. Once you're bucking up above 3 million, they want to take, or they're going to 3.5. It's just outrageous. These people are never satisfied. They never rest. And if anybody thinks that we can negotiate with them, or that we can reach some accommodation with them, or that we need to reach across the aisle in some fashion, no, we can't. They want it all, and we can't really, we can't really deal with it. It's just outrageous. Now, that music that you're hearing means that we're coming up on the half hour. We got a few callers calling in, and we will definitely take them in the next half hour. This is Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles, back with you after the break.
Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
Yes, and thank you all for joining me again on right here at Radio Free Los Angeles. If you like what you hear and want to support us, remember this is citizen-sponsored radio. Go to CaliforniaTaxpayersUnion.org or SchoolChoice2020.org and help to support what we do here. And in addition to being the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. We are, of course, the voice of choice in Los Angeles, choice meaning choice in education for your children. So we've been talking about the conditions here in California and the urge to move elsewhere for greater economic opportunity, lower taxes, lower regulation, and yes, more freedom. So we've got some calls, and next up is, I think, somebody that I know, Marcy from South Pasadena. How are you this evening, Marcy?
Hello, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I was listening to your whole discussion and what Victor Davis Hanson had to say, and it's very personal for us because I've lived here all my life, and we're a family that's actually trying not to leave because our lives are here. We don't want to leave, but it's just so it's too much. It's not just the taxes. It's everything. It's education, health care, the cost of living. There's fees and fines. It's just everywhere you turn, and it's so hard to cope with it. And we're just devastated. So right now, that's what we're trying to find ways. How can we stay in California?
Right. Yeah, it really is. You know, I was talking with Kathleen Wells after at the end of her show. And in fact, she had to run. I would like to have continued my conversation with her. But one of the problems that we have in California, and it's a multidimensional problem here as to why it happens, but I think you see it with your daughters, your two lovely daughters, and I with my sons and the sons of others here. You can end up making a high gross wage, but there's no way to get ahead. Right. I mean, there was a time in California when you could work a job, you could make money, you could save money, you could buy a house, and you could own it in 20 or 30 years and retire here. In California in the good weather. And millions of people did exactly that. But now we see young people going into college. Many of them have this high education debt, so-called student loan debt. If there's ever a bad deal, that's the worst deal of all. Now the federal government owns the company store. So when you finish borrowing all that money, they go basically to government institutions that are high priced. Then the federal government owes you, and that debt you can't write off. You can't bankrupt it, no nothing. So that plus high taxes. How in the world do people get ahead? And then what happens? As you know, and we've discussed it before, is that people, youngsters, first delay forming families because they're going to school, thinking that they're going to get a good job that'll let them have a family. Then they get out of school and they've got this student debt. Yeah,
the cost of living.
And the cost of living.
Yeah.
So then they're looking around for a suitable spouse, and now they're 22. Or 23, 24 years later, it's not uncommon to see people delaying marriage until their 30s. Then maybe they're stuck because of a misguided feminism. Maybe some of the girls are focused on career. Well, by the time they sort that out, they're in their 30s. They're still paying off debt. Now they're trying to have a kid, so they limit it to one or two kids. In the meanwhile, we're importing children by the hundreds of thousands, millions into the United States, and telling these same upwardly mobile people, youngsters who went to these schools, that we expect them to support all these newcomers' children when they can barely support their own plus their lifestyle. And then when they say, well, hey, look, we'd like to get ahead. We went to school because we were enchanted by the American dream. We want to do that, but now we want to pursue it. And now you say we're greedy, so you're going to tax us some more.
Yeah.
So, so they look around and they say, hey, look, I really don't have any chance of having what mom and dad have. Sure as hell not here in this state. And they start looking around. But anyway, it was your phone call and I started talking.
No, you're articulating everything that we're living that's so hard for me to articulate. I'm just telling you what we're experiencing. And it seems like more and more, just even in the last 5 years, the people who are making it are the wealthy, and then there's a growing class of very poor people, and the only people in the middle are the government employees and the people on welfare who are doing better than families like mine.
Yes.
And the other thing that just bothers me so much is the discussion of the separation of families for immigrants that are illegal immigrants when they come to the border. And yet these policies, that's the much worse separation of American families. Our family is here. Our roots are here, and we'll have to leave that if we leave California.
That's right.
So it's a devastating thing that we're all facing, and there are many Californians that are in the same boat.
That's right. And then you take the San Gabriel Valley here. The cost of housing is rising, and of course it rises for many, many reasons. Number one, because of rising demand created by all the pressure at the bottom of the economic scale. So you've got people coming in and bidding for very substandard housing and having to pay high rents for that. Yeah. Well, that forces the price of everything above there. So that modest home in Pasadena or Van Nuys or whatever, suddenly its value, which ought to be maybe at $150,000 or $200,000, suddenly you're paying $500,000, $750,000 or $800,000 for it. Yeah. And in San Francisco, it's even worse than that. Mm-hmm. I've seen some of these numbers here in San Francisco where for a 1,000-foot square foot apartment that rents are starting at $3,000 a month or something like that. I think it might even be worse. Yeah. But the other reason why housing prices go up, of course, is because of the artificial limitation on the supply. Yeah. So they make it more difficult to build new houses. We had that, who was that commie? Chu, what's her name? Judy Chu, and Barack Obama were out here, or I guess it was her, here a few years ago.
I think so.
And they took many thousands of acres in the San Gabriel Valley out of circulation and made it impossible to develop. Mm-hmm. We have these very attractive areas along the coast of California for 900 miles from San Isidro to, Crescent City up there. You go all the way north. Well, we can't develop that because, we think it's pretty and we don't want development. So they want more money from us, but make it more difficult. And as a result, I don't know and I've thought about your daughters and many, many youngsters. I don't know what kind of a future they have, and yet they can go to many places in the South and get into a nice little neighborhood and buy a nice little 3-bedroom place, have themselves some kids and a house, and live in a decent community and never look back.
Yeah, right.
And what gets destroyed, you and I have talked about this many times, what really gets destroyed is the family.
Yeah.
And you pointed out not only you guys under pressure, many families are under pressure, but this this artificially delayed adolescence in order to go to college. Youngsters are naturally thinking about getting married by their early 20s, but we're delaying this process so long that they end up living together, they or they're childless for many years. These are not good things. we almost force them into long delayed parentage, and then we sell it to them. And of course, now if they do have children, then what kind of schools are they going to go to? They barely afford the house. So, then they look around.
They're lucky if they even get into a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent area.
Right.
And not even a house. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, the schools in some of the areas that managed to make the cut, the demand for housing in those cities goes sky high. It's absolutely outrageous, but, the public schools are no great shakes. And so those same parents, even if the schools are good, young parents might look at those schools and say, hey, I don't want my children being taught what they're teaching, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want my children going to schools that don't like me, don't like my religion, don't like my country, don't like my Constitution, don't like my face, don't like my color, don't like my attitude. All right. So what are they going to do? They're paying high taxes for schools that they can't really use, but they don't have any alternative. So why I think I'm trying to remember. I was listening to a lecture on this point, but I think over the last since 1985 or thereabouts, I think there've been maybe 4 million people have left California.
Wow.
So even as our population has grown to 40 million, we have lost 4 million producing people. Now, and this was another point that I heard Hansen making earlier today on another tape. It was a speech he gave in Bakersfield. But let's just go to the precarious state of California finances here. Let's go back to that one number. 150,000 households in a state of 40 million people pay nearly half of the total annual state income tax. And that, of course, the income tax furnishes about half of California state revenues, which means 150,000 people, just 150,000, pay 25% of the state's taxes. So that 150,000 households are obviously upwardly mobile, right? Mm-hmm. And upwardly mobile, not economically, but literally mobile. Mm-hmm. And if you had a shift of, say, 10% of that number, 15,000, right? 150,000, 10% is 15,000. If 15,000 people in California leave, that would reduce California's revenues by not 10%, but no, they're paying 25. It'd reduce it by 2.5%, right? The revenues would go down 2.5%, and then they would do what governments always do: instead of lowering prices and improving the quality of the product, like we capitalists have to do in business,
spending. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. They would cut services and raise taxes so that they don't have to reduce the compensation of the bureaucrats and don't have to address the pension problem.
And Mike, that was one last point I wanted to make from the work we're doing at the California Taxpayers Union. We, and specifically in my city in South Pasadena, looking at the budget, we can see that they actually, even though they say they don't, they have plenty of money. They have more than enough money that they need. Every year their revenues increase, but their spending increases. But even with the spending increases, they have enough money. What the problem is the debt, and the biggest part of the debt are the pensions.
That's correct.
And that's what it seems like it's fueling the tax increases, which is fueling the cost of living increases. And I know it's much more complicated than that, but...
Yeah, in some ways, yes, but in most ways, no. It's no more complicated than what you what you expressed right there.
Yeah.
The governments in these cities are just as runaway as the federal government, And we've been over this issue time and again. For those of you out there who might wish that we were talking about Attorney General Barr and Trump's comments on treason, which I'm itching to talk about a little bit, but we try to keep the emphasis on state and local, and particularly on our schools, so that you understand that the federal government is really only half of the problem. Mm-hmm. The other half of the money spent in the United States and a huge part of the debt is run up by the states, state and locals. And that happens right in your city, whether it's El Segundo, Huntington Park, South Pasadena, Mission Viejo, Irvine, Newport Beach, you name it. No matter where you live, those people are out spending it. And, it brings to mind our campaigns down there in San Marino for some of those folks down there on the city council. And we urged them, as we urged the people in South Pasadena, the city council in South Pasadena, in Sierra Madre, in Arcadia, in Glendale, we urged them to state the true amount of the pension debt on their financial statements, and they refuse to do so. Yeah. They keep taking that phony baloney number from CalPERS so that it understates the obligation and permits them to keep this illusion going in the mind of the people that we've got plenty of money, that there's a surplus there, and there is a surplus of cash on hand, except for, in fact, it is spoken for. Yes. It's gone. Yeah. This state is toes up, man. If there's anything, if anybody thinks that Victor Davis Hanson is pessimistic, hell, I think he's a bloody optimist, because obviously here on this station we speak the truth. And I'll renew my invitation to the treasurers out there, to the California State Treasurer, the elected councilmen, city attorneys, union reps, anybody, call in here and tell us that it ain't so. Yeah. And walk us through it. We'd love to hear that.
They want to keep the illusion going long enough just to get the next tax increase.
That's right. And to keep paying themselves, because in their view, these pension debts, it's like an account receivable. So if you're in business, there's some people that are good for it, right? Yeah. So, you can we'll let you run a tab. I know on paper, there's not enough money in your bank account to pay for our future pensions. But hey, you can owe us, no problem. Right? So they run that up. They make a contractual debt out of it, which in my view is designed to secure constitutional protection as a contract that cannot be modified by government action. They're going to try to create a circumstance where these pensions cannot ever be paid. And then later on, they're going to come to us to say, well, look, that's a contract. You took our services. You made a deal, right? Well, as a matter of fact, we never made a deal with anybody, did we, Marcy?
No.
No. These people, the unions and the public employees, are dealing with themselves. It's self-dealing.
Yeah. Right.
They go out there.
And the taxpayers don't know. Mm-hmm.
They don't know. And, even though we tell them, man, we have all these bright people in these suburban communities in San Gabriel Valley, and you would think that they would get it. Now, a chunk of them do, but most of them just don't pay attention. We find that maybe about 20 to maybe one out of three, one out of four people, maybe, max. Usually it's 1 out of 5 that actually get it, understand it, and care about it. Mm-hmm. But these people actually made promises to themselves. They went out there, they recruited candidates for for city council, people they knew they could rely upon. They got out the vote. All those teachers sent stuff open the bags, little information scams, walk precincts, put money into their campaigns, all this kind of stuff. Then they get on the school board or the city council, and guess what? They vote for more money for education.
Yeah.
It is outrageous. And, but...
Mike, the last thing I want to say is that
yes,
I think I hear a lot about reparations lately.
Yeah,
and the people that need reparations are us, the residents of California, from the government. It's just the whole thing is so unfair and so.
It is a joke, and it's just another way that the people are trying to get one group called blacks upset about something and lead them to believe that they're entitled to reparations or that they ought to be paid. And so we sit here talking about maybe the dumbest idea in the whole world, given the fact that most of the population in the United States that would be required to pay the bill arrived here or was born after slavery, right? So what the hell are we talking about? It's a stupid question, and it's a classic example of the left staying on offense, creating some new right, some new controversy. And my message to the black community is that if you think that this is going to do it, or anybody else out there isn't making it in life, and you think it's my fault or the man's fault or government's fault, and that somebody's going to go get you some money, is going to fix everybody, you're dumber than I thought. That's never going to work. It's never worked ever. Stealing money from one man to give to another, it isn't going to work. And by the way, that same black population where they're talking up reparations, I think they're just trying to keep the blacks in on the Democrat presidential race through 2020. They're scared to death because, as a matter of fact, the Democrat Party has pretty much abandoned the black community and has traded Jews and blacks in for Mexicans and Muslims. Yeah. That's their new political emphasis. I've talked with many Jews. I've talked with many blacks who understand exactly what's going on. Yeah. And these are two traditional groups that have backed the Democrat Party absolutely uncritically.
Yeah.
And where's it gotten them? Behind the eight ball. What we need, what we all need, is a shot at the future, and that begins with a quality education, and you're not going to get a quality education from the government. You're just not. It can't happen. And we need to get these children out of the system and to put education, which is also about 1/2 of the money in the state of California that comes into the government revenues. We need to get that money and that institution under the control of parents, regardless of their race, regardless of their political affiliation, their religion, sexual orientation, or anything else. The parents need to make those decisions. And, that music that you're hearing means that we're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour. Marcy, I want to thank you for calling in and for stimulating conversation.
My pleasure.
All right. You take care. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
And for those of us who want to join us in the next half hour, we'll have our Government Grifter of the Week award, and you can reach us at 866-870-5752.
Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
And yes, it is Mike Alexander, Radio Free Los Angeles. I'm without my co-host tonight, Jonathan Wilson, who I think is enjoying himself somewhere in Las Vegas. So, Jonathan, good luck. Hope you make bail, my friend. Have a good time over there. We'll see you next week. We've been talking about leaving California and the overall crisis in California created by government. And by the way, if you want to be part of this program, our telephone number here is 866-870-5752. So we've been talking a lot about it. We had Marcy on last hour from South Pasadena, and now we have Bill from Buena Park who wants to talk about the same topic. Bill, how are you this evening?
Well, good evening. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
There aren't too many venues where I can talk about this openly without being
abused,
a little somewhat criticized.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my situation, I'm a 72-year-old fella.
Yeah.
And I see what's going on in California. You don't have to be a brainiac to see how brazen the government in California is, having to do with gas taxes, and they're salivating at chipping away at Prop 13, and it just goes on and on.
Yes.
And so I'm looking at alternatives, which include Nevada and Arizona. And so,
hey, Bill, give me a little bit of background on yourself first. Were you born here in California?
No, I'm from the Northeast.
Okay, and so when did you come to California, Bill?
1973.
Okay. So, where'd you go to work? Aerospace industry or what?
All private industry, mid-sized companies. Mm-hmm. I've got a background and degree in public accounting.
Sure.
So I know a little bit about, the numbers I kind of come somewhat naturally to me.
Sure.
Except unless they're masked by, intentionally by, propagandists.
Right, like government. Yeah. And so you were attracted to California or the Northeast. You liked the weather. You liked the place. It was a growing economy.
I had to come out here on various details, and that included San Francisco area and Southern California. And I said, hey, if I went back east, got my degree, and came back here, and I decided, hey, I can live anywhere I want, where I want to go. And I said, hey, that California place was pretty nice. So as soon as I got out of school, I came back here in 1973. Yeah,
great. You're like so many people, And now, did you say you were in the military before, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you're like so many people that came to L.A. That's how my dad ended up in L.A. He was here before World War II, enlisted here, and he insisted that he get discharged here, and he did, and that's why we're in L.A. rather than Missouri.
Well, I heard that so many people were discharged right here in, matter of fact, in Orange County, I heard.
Yeah.
When I was discharged, I was stationed technically on the East Coast, and I wanted to be discharged back there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I wanted to go to school back there. So,
absolutely. So you're planning to leave, and now you're 72. You're an accountant. You're sophisticated about money and numbers and taxes. And what is it that's motivating you? Specifically, Bill, is it that you see that over time this level of taxation and the high cost of living is going to make it impossible for you to maintain your own standard of living, or you just find it obnoxious? You could afford it, but you just want to leave because you hate what they're doing.
Yes and yes. Yes and yes.
Okay.
And while it sounds like you're putting words in my mouth, you are not. I mean, this is crazy. I just don't believe that the state of California can sustain itself on this course. And with a totally blue state and a super majority legislation,
yes,
this is collective tyranny in my
It
opinion.
is. It is, and it's a national phenomenon. And I'm going to link this into to a broader discussion of what's going on in our form of government, particularly the schools, and why I think changing the schools is the key to changing the conditions in the state, because basically they are indoctrinating a group of people long enough and hard enough to where they can do whatever they want. So once you've dumbed down the population enough, then they're no longer able to be critical of you. They'll continue to vote for you, and that's the key role that's played not only by the universities and the propaganda mills that we call the mainstream media. It is most importantly carried out in K through 12. That's the challenge.
There's one point I wanted to make, if I could
sure.
take a second and make this, because your former guest, Marcy, I think her
yes,
name was.
Marcy.
It sounded like she was struggling. I mean, she wants to make a move, but there are a lot of what I've come to believe is, for my situation, is that when I talk to my relatives about relocating to some other place, I get a lot of pushback. Why? Because they don't want to see me leave.
Right.
And so that's an emotional. Your family's an emotional tie. But the more I think about it, the more I think in terms of if I stick around because of my family, which would be that's the easy route.
Right.
The hard route is making the jump.
Yeah, it is. And
but if I make the jump, some of them will follow. And
that's right. Yeah.
And if some of them follow, they will have better lives than they're destined for here in California.
That's right. This is the
and
age.
I hope Marcy is hearing me, because I think that there's a lot of us that feel this way, but we're nervous about making the jump.
Oh, we are. Hey, Bill, I've got some other callers here. I'd love to continue this conversation. Promise me that you'll call back and give us an update on your situation. And maybe the next time we have Bill calling from the U-Haul trailer rental somewhere on Rosecrans or Firestone in Buena Park. Bill, thanks for calling, my friend. Talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we have George in Los Angeles who wants to talk about taxation.
Hi, Mike.
How are you, George? Good to hear you again.
Yes. Well, I'm preparing a good gift for you to be sent out because, I feel that, you need to really make a double-pronged attack. We all do because of this collectivization, this communist activity. I called him Gavin Gruesome when I talked to you before.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I think now we're going to have to call him Grab 'em and Goose 'em.
Exactly,
because that's what he's trying to do to every one of us, and virtually every property taxpayer. It's much like this wealth tax. And, this $1.69 a square foot for everything over, what is it, I don't know, 1,000 or 1,200 square feet. There's some garbage like that that's going to get everybody from, $300 or $400 to $1,200
That's
extra.
Right.
And they're going to throw it at these schools that are 47th out of 50th without any consideration for quality, and we of course know what it's just the big indoctrination.
Well, it is, and so what we see. I mean, you're talking about the elimination of the Proposition 13
That's
protections.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference. There's 1,001 new proposals, and no matter how much they get, it will never be enough. Look at Venezuela.
It will never be enough until they take all of the private property of all of the persons residing in this state. And the most obnoxious thing that they just threw out was a taxation of water, as necessary for life. And we don't tax food, we don't tax medicine, okay? But taxing water, our bodies are just like the planet. We're about 70% water.
Right.
And so
hey, don't say that too loud, George. I say don't say it too loud. They'll tax the water content and in your body.
Well, I
George,
was sharing too. You remember the Beatles song "Tax Man"? If you drive a car, I'll tax the street. If you try to walk, I'll tax your feet.
Right. That's right.
So that's
I imagine the Beatles are very closely acquainted with the tax man.
Right,
you know, George.
In the socialist period, and they were at the 95th, paying 95% of their take. And the song, goes it's one for you, 19 for me, because I'm the tax man.
Right.
And you're working for nobody but me.
Right.
And so this is what we have to look for with Green New Deal, any of this garbage that Pocahontas is honking her horn about.
Yeah.
So I really feel that parents
hey, George,
up.
But it really isn't that much different than what McConnell and the Republicans are presiding over. We're up against a government that, regardless of party, behaves just about the same.
Right.
Now I know that people call here with different takes on all that. And yes, I know all about Donald Trump, but the fact is that I think our economy isn't growing that much at all. And by the way, don't call me and start, with the Trump stuff. I'm not anti-Trump. If you listen to me, you know better than that.
Know.
But, we have to be able as citizens to step back from this thing and critique it. And I'm not blaming that on Trump. I think the whole damn thing is out of control, federal, state, and local.
That's right.
And our major problem throughout this whole mess is the dumbing down of the American population to the point where we will accept what we've been told. And, George, you sound to me like a man of a certain age, probably grew up in the same era that I did. But, this past week, and I'd like to keep my emphasis on local, and this is linked to the public schools. Only a bunch of people that had been raised in the public schools and suckled on social media and the university system and all that. This past 10 days, I heard Donald Trump use the T word. Treason. Traitors.
Yes. That's right.
And even on the Drudge Report, I didn't see that. How is it that anybody with any constitutional orientation, and these would include the Democrats that you and I grew up with, the Democrats we know, how in the world could this not be the biggest story? We had a coup. They attempted and are continuing to attempt to overthrow the legitimate elected president of the United States of America. And it seems as if nobody is that excited about it, except maybe some of us and who listen to a few people who are doing a wonderful job out there, by the way.
Yes,
but what we have witnessed is
break open some of these documents and blast out to the whole country. Hey, look, here's what you got. Remember what all these people told you?
Yeah.
Well, here's the truth, right in your face.
I mean, you heard Donald Trump out there trying to get on an airplane there, and he does his usual hit and run with the media.
Yeah.
And he calls them all out. And what did we hear from McConnell, the leader of the Senate? Nothing. How about from the minority leader in Congress? What's that guy's name from Bakersfield?
Chuck Schumer.
No. I was thinking of the Republican.
Mitch McConnell.
No, the congressional guy. Why can't I? McCarthy.
Oh, McCarthy.
We heard nothing
Kevin
from any.
McCarthy.
Just nothing. It's one of those things like you're in the middle of a party and there's a body rotting and smelling in the middle of the room. Everybody's stepping over it, and you're asking yourself, "Am I the only guy who's seeing a body here?"
And smelling that?
And smelling it, and everybody else is sipping champagne and dancing away as the band plays.
And none of them's got a thing of Vicks, the Vapo rub on them either.
Right? Yeah,
They're
nothing.
breathing full.
Right?
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that not only appalls me, but puzzles me. This is an active, ongoing effort to get rid of our president, whom we elected. And this is a complete disregard of the Constitution, which belongs to you and to me, and upon which you and I have an agreement. This is one of the things I want to pick this up maybe in my discussion next week.
Yeah.
I really want to discuss the role of the public schools and the universities in eroding the underlying basis for a constitution.
That is very true.
Because the Constitution itself, like any contract, you and I and most of our, once upon a time, most of our citizens agreed on these basic principles.
Yes.
And we wrote a Constitution that reflected our social agreement.
And it's supposed to be a yardstick to measure our human interactions.
Right. And a Constitution, like a contract, does not represent agreement. It is preceded by agreement, and then it formalizes that agreement. It writes it down.
That's right.
And what we have is a situation here in the United States where that underlying agreement no longer exists.
Yeah.
And that's the major reason why we have a constitutional crisis, is because that underlying social compact, that common understanding of our relationship to each other, our relationship to God, our relationship to the government, our understand, all those things have been challenged and put aside. Hey, I've got to do my Government Grifter of the Week award, George.
Just one last thing.
No last thing. I got to go.
Sowell, said, now, when I was a professor...
Hey, George, I can't do it right now. I got Juan Tierra coming up. Call me back next week, George. Thank you so much. All right, now, drum roll, please. All right, coming to you from Hollywood, California, actually Glendale Studios here. We have our weekly Government Grifter of the Week award, and we have our special consultant on high-priced government help out there, John Land, affectionately known as Juan Tierra. How are you this evening, John?
Very well, Mike.
All right.
From the lower fringes of Mount Washington.
Take the music down just a little bit, please. Thank you. Perfect. Great. So what you got for us, John?
Well, Santa Monica, the People's Republic, is a real target-rich city for.
Oh man, you got to do some work, man. You can't just go for the layup and go to Santa Monica every week.
Well, there's a couple of real zingers in here.
All right.
So here we go. As you may know, Santa Monica is a liberal, leftist bastion.
Oh yeah, and tell the audience again what the population is there.
About 92,000.
It's under $100,000. Wait to hear these salaries. Go ahead.
Okay, well, it's been in rent control city since '79. It's the highest city tax in the state. A 10.25% sales tax, 10% utility tax, 14% hotel tax, and a 10% parking tax. Outside of that,
wow. Outside of that,
our usual source, Transparent California, fiscal year 2015. Here are nominees: city manager, total pay and benefits, $440,668.
Oh, man.
An assistant city librarian, total pay and benefits, 220, 558.
Wait. That's the assistant.
That's the assistant.
Oh, so what is the chief? Well, go ahead. I'm interested.
Actually, I looked that up, and I couldn't find a chief. I found a reference librarian at $200,000.
Oh,
that's the highest other librarian.
Madam Librarian.
And third, here's one that's really an interesting one.
Yeah.
Farmers Market Supervisor. And benefits.
Yeah.
Don't laugh. $142,903
for supervising the farmers market.
Farmers market.
My God.
Now,
wow.
I'm having a tough time here between 2 and 3, the assistant librarian and the farmers market supervisor.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do what Jonathan. I'm going to do to you. What
all right.
Jonathan
Drum roll, please.
All right. Wait. Don't drum roll. Okay.
All right. Our winner this week is.
Now, I'm going to do to you what Jonathan did to me. I'm going to throw it back to you because I'm stuck.
Well, I have this special antipathy for librarians, so I'm going to go with that 200. What was it? 226.
$220,558 for an assistant city librarian.
For an assistant librarian in an era when everything's on online and
Kindle,
and you can buy Kindle, and I tell you, we just need to give everybody a password. It is astonishing. And I forget what Santa Monica's unfunded pension debt is, but you can bet it's up there at a couple $100 million, and yet they spend like there's no tomorrow. This is what we're doing here, ladies and gentlemen. Government is out of control at every level, federal, state, and local. Do not overlook what's happening here. And when you see these people, telling you what to think, what to do, what to wear, what color you can paint your house, the people in these cities are just as much affected by the totalitarian mindset as anybody in the Congress of the United States. You live there. They've got total control over you and where you go. They control your children's minds. The hometown, the local area, the state of California is where totalitarianism plays out. Right here. This is where you live. And they're part and parcel. And, John, I appreciate your help in pointing this out each and every week. And we look forward to your nominees next week. Thank you, John. All right.
My pleasure.
Okay, so at any rate, we're coming up here. How much time do I have left? All right. Jeff is holding up one finger, but it's his index finger. All right, so I will thank Jeff, who's always great to have him on the board. Thank you, Brooke, for doing your usual wonderful job. And Jonathan, we miss you. Josh Jacobs, we miss you. We'll see you next week. On Easter Sunday, I'm going to try to come in. We may tape it. I'm not sure. But if you don't have any place else to go to church, join us at St. Cyril of Jerusalem in Encino for a wonderful Easter liturgy. Take care. See you next Sunday night.